All right, we are officially recording. Hello, everyone, hopping on. We're really happy to have you here today. I just want to remind everyone to stay on mute. This is actually not a typical webinar. It's an actual, meeting. So please mute yourselves as you can. And once the presenters start, I'm actually going to have you all turn off your video too, just because that way we can preserve bandwidth for our presenters. So there are three organizations that have put our heads together to make this amazing series. I personally represent the Portland Green Schools Committee, and then I will have the other two organizations introduce themselves, but it's Room for More and the AIA Committee on Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. There we go. The mission of the Portland Green Schools Committee is to really promote sustainability in school through design and operation. Right now it's a little tricky because we're not physically in schools, but there's a ton of opportunity in the design and operation part, even though no one is in them. And we really work to educate stakeholders and advocate for green and healthy schools. We actually have a meeting tomorrow. If anybody is interested in joining, feel free to shoot us an email. We'd love to have you. This year obviously threw us for a little bit of a loop because we planned for a bunch of in-person activities and now we're virtual. So tomorrow we'll be talking a lot about what the next year holds for us. And you can follow us on our stellar social media. So I'm actually going to pass this off to Ruwan to talk about Room for More.
Thanks, Riley. Yeah, so Room for More is a group that we co-founded, Ed and Leah and myself and plus Gowrie, who may or may not be here, a few years ago. And because we saw a need in the architecture, engineering, and construction field for increased diversity. But not only just increased diversity, increase in the inclusion of diverse members in that community. So it started very informal, just a few meetings to figure out what we want to do, but it has grown into a group of 80 or so more people. We are looking for more contractor side folks. It's mostly architects and engineers, but our goals are to increase diversity and inclusion in both the architecture, engineering, and construction fields. So glad you could join us. And if you want to get more information, there's the LinkedIn. You can follow us on LinkedIn. You can see it below, or you can email us at roomformorepdx@gmail.com. Thanks.
Thanks, Ruwan. And then I think Octavio, you're up.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Octavio Gutierrez. I am the Vice Chair of the AIA Oregon Committee on Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And you're going to be hearing from Kelly, our chair, a little later today. But our group was formed a few years ago with the goal to expand our organization's efforts in EDI with our member community by offering programs that address leadership development, workplace culture, career development, and just broader community engagement. So I know a lot of you have seen some of your faces this week already at our annual symposium, Future Vision. That wraps up tomorrow with a pair of exciting panels with two sets of firms, or two groups of firms, discussing JEDI and their internal firm culture and their external practices. So you can read our keystones on the slide there, but our mission today remains to just better reflect the demographic richness of our communities and our profession, and to advocate for those who are underrepresented in our field.
Great, thank you. And you know what I think I just realized in my excitement to hit the record button? I think I started on the wrong slide. I totally did. So welcome, everybody. Let's backtrack here. Welcome to It Starts at School. This is the third panel in our series. We are here as architects, engineers, students, school advocates, basically the whole gamut, trying to understand creating equity and inclusion in the AEC industry. We did have a part one, which can be found here. We have, which was students, and then an educator that spoke and moderated by Nicole from Portland Public Schools. And then we had part two. Gosh, it feels like it was last week, but it was actually a month ago. That was mostly focused on the AEC community, the architecture, engineering, and construction. And you may see Ruwan's name there. Thank you so much for being there, Ruwan. And that was moderated by Karina Ruiz. And now I'm gonna skip past these slides. My bad, you guys. And so I did just want to bring this up, that these were some of the key themes that came out of part 1 and 2. As we go into part 3 here, I think it's really important to just kind of sit and think on them, because this third part here is really looking forward to understand, you know, the relevance and the way that we can continue to do this work. And remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So welcome to part 3. I am really excited to introduce our moderator, Ed Herrera from Brick Architecture. So Ed, I'm going to pass this off to you to introduce yourself and do your thing.
Thanks, Riley, and PDX Green Schools for providing a safe and supportive space where we can be our authentic and vulnerable selves for this very important conversation. I am Ed Herrera, and I am a senior associate at Brick Architecture. And like Alon said, I am also with Room for More. Right now, because of all the recent events and our social justice scenario, there's a sense of urgency with providing an equitable environment at the educational level and also in the workplace environment. And with respect to what we're seeing right now, specifically in the AEC industry, and even more micro, what we've seen with Room for More, with the engineering firms and the architecture design firms that we have been in communication with. There are groups like what Becky Epstein is helping to lead over at Sarah Architects, where they are pursuing the JUST label, and Rwan and PAE, they are very deep in the middle of their JEDI efforts, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And more organizations are opening up to hearing a more diverse voice collectively. And with that, someone, okay. With that, groups like Room for More and Co-Edi are just organically being supported.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
And sorry.
And let me hop in. And if anyone is unmuted, can you please be sure to mute yourselves, that we're getting some background audio. Please go ahead. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Recalibrate. All right, so with respect to Room for More and Co-Edi, it's becoming organic in terms of our firms, our design firms and our engineering firms and our construction firms are supporting these nonprofits or grassroots groups like Room for More and Co-Edi, and also providing another safe space to be able to explore these issues. And it's providing more representation, and it's sustaining the community. So I would like to introduce our very robust panel, starting with Maddie.
Hi, my name is Maddie Belden. I am currently a first-year architecture student at Portland State University, and I'm also the co-leader of the PDX Youth Climate Summit that will be happening on December 12th. And in addition to that, I'm also a part of the Your Street, Your Voice cohort that's part of Camp ELSO and is led by Jackie Santalucia, and she'll be talking about that. Also, I go by she, her pronouns. Those are the pronouns I identify with. And a lot of the work that I do, both within educational and organizing spaces, I think it's really important to focus on equity, inclusion, and diversity in a way that isn't trying to fulfill a quota or just try to get people who represent from those identities just to like fulfill something that a business or like an institution demands. And so like with that being said, I think that I had to actively search for these opportunities in which there were BIPOC and underrepresented people in positions of leadership and education, because I think in a lot of ways the the institution of education has failed BIPOC students because we haven't gotten that representation or people who have similar lived experiences to us to relate to and to see racial justice racial justice and design as something that is a lived experience and something that they have to actively dismantle white supremacy for, rather than something that is often viewed as hypothetical through the lens of like white people. And so in my organizing too, something that I'm really passionate about is centering youth, especially BIPOC and LGBTQ voices, and making that space intentionally for those voices, because when we focus on underrepresented youth, it becomes inclusive for all. And so there's some slides after this that will show the Portland Youth Climate Summit. It's something that I'm working on with a bunch of other youth in Portland. And we're offering a bunch of different workshops. You can see accessibility, mental health, transportation justice, climate organizing 101, mapping our rules, white supremacy, indigenous voices, and these are all workshops that are meant to, that are targeted towards people within the age group of 15 to 25, and it's open to like anyone else who wants to participate too. And you'll be able to like choose from these workshops that will all be happening on December 12th. So I encourage you to go to that RSVP, tinyurl.com/PDX Summit. You can learn more about us and register to attend. And then if you also wanted to follow us on Instagram, I'll put some information about us below, but it's something that we're all really passionately working towards because we want to make something that's accessible to BIPOC youth, and that can be difficult through a virtual streaming service, and also just because climate justice oftentimes is framed in a way that uses a lot of jargon or inaccessible language. So yeah, thank you. I'll pass it off to Hikma then.
Hi, my name is Hikma. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a sophomore at Benson Polytechnic High School, and I'm majoring in health doc. And my main focus is requiring ethnic studies in Portland Public Schools, K through 12, because in my opinion, and many others' opinion as well, starting our kids off very young, teaching them about their people, their culture, and their people, I think that's very important, and it makes kids more responsible and more likely to be outgoing because they feel welcomed in their schools. And I think for me specifically, as an immigrant, as being as someone who's Black as well, I never felt like I belonged in my schools because it was always the history classes and the lessons that were taught to me were always whitewashed, and they always depicted Black people as people who always struggled. And it's true, we did struggle throughout history, but there were times when we were successful and achieved many things as well. And so I believe that needs to be taught, and that needs to have a specific course. And so I think it was, for me, it was always hard to get along with people, especially when I came to the United States. I dedicated all my time learning English for about 3 months. I would always watch TV, like kids TV shows and stuff like that. And I think me dedicating that time to learn someone else's culture or language so that I can communicate well with people is very good. But I felt like I had to fit in. And so I got rid of all of the accents I had within like 6 months. And I think that was a very unwelcoming part of my school. I always had to fit in. I never felt like me. I never felt comfortable sharing my culture, sharing my people, sharing where I was from. I would always just ignore my people. I would just ignore my culture and just try to be as white as possible, and sound as white as possible as well. I don't know if that makes sense, sounding white, but that was always what I felt like I had to do. And I think that goes well with many other kids who were in the same situation that I was in. And I think that needs to be that needs to be changed. And that also goes not just for our schools, but for many like occupations as well. So for example, me as a health doc major, I've never seen someone to look up to, and I think representation really matters. Why do I always have to be the first to do something? Why can't I have someone to look up to? And I think that that's very important to teach our kids. So yeah.
Thank you very much. I just want to get in here real quick and make plugs for panel 1 and 2, because with regards to representation and assimilation, I think those 2 panels also hit on those subjects. And and another thing tied to this conversation this share that Hikema shared with us. This whole idea of be the Jenny that Gustavo brought up in panel 2, and that's what she's talking about. And we all had to be the Jenny, and you got to go check out panel 2 if you haven't yet. Thanks. And for the rest of our panel, I'll ask Jackie to introduce herself.
Hey y'all, my name is Jackie Santalucia, she, her pronouns. I am the program director of Your Street, Your Voice and Empower Her at Camp ELSO. As Maddie and Hikema said, we are teaching classes about design as a tool for racial justice. I'm gonna plug Hikema's ask about getting the video requested. Thank you, Brittany, for asking that. If you want to email me directly to send videos and photos, I'll put my email address in the chat too, because both Maddie and Hikema will be presenting their final projects next week as part of the final presentations of the fall cohorts on the 17th and the 18th. And so I'm an architect by trade, but I've transitioned into education and talking about representation and really focusing on mentorship and providing access and opportunity for folks to become part of the AECD industry. So thanks for having me. Really happy to be here.
Thanks, Jackie, and welcome. And let's go next.
Hi, everybody. My name is Leah Peacock. I am an architect with the ZGF here at Town. And when Ed asked me to share sort of my own story and how I get to where I'm at, I couldn't help but think back to where I came from. And for everybody who didn't know, I grew up in Jakarta, Indonesia. And also another thing that maybe not many of you know is in May 1998, there was an event called the May 1998 riots. It's essentially like a mass violence against ethnics that's like me, like Chinese Indonesians. And so after a series of events, I ended up in Eugene, Oregon. Quite a stark difference from Jakarta, Indonesia. And, I think actually the recent events here in this country kind of brought me back to that memory. But I also wanted to think of how it impacted me as a person and how I see my career. I was lucky at UOVO. There were a lot of international students to connect with. But, I got into architecture because my mom told me so. Because, they said, if you're good with math and art, here you go into architecture. So I had nothing, I didn't know anything about the field whatsoever. But I feel lucky to actually ended up falling in love with the profession by the end of the second term. And I think just like maybe a lot of international students, usually you gravitate towards your fellow international students that's especially from your own background. But being in architecture, I think I only knew one other international student in my class who's from Kenya. So it actually really forced me, similar to what Hikema was talking about earlier, to practice my English. And I think through that, and then just keeping in mind what my mom had sacrificed, you know, as a single mom to put me here by force, essentially. You know, being chased out of my own country. You know, I work really hard, probably as a lot of you probably also experience, you know, working 2 jobs. You know, I think I try to save as much money as possible, and, you know, knowing that 12 credits and 18 credits are, you know, basically the same fee. I, on average, always take 18 credits. I think I think my record was one term I took 29 credits. I know, it's like, why? But I think my goal was like, I wanted to graduate as soon as possible. So, I mean, I'm proud that I graduated in 4 years, you know, with a double degree. And, you know, after graduation, I came across some hindrance as well, right? I think, as some of you international students might know, you know, we only have like 1 year of work permit, and we need sponsorships. And so when I finally found a job, it was like, I hold it like my life depends on it, right? Like, for me, you know, it's heads down. I have to work the hardest as anybody around me, and I never complain. And I'm very uncomfortable asking about like a raise or a career advancement. And not until like 5 to 10 years later that I started to see encouragement from, you know, I think I used to work at Dawa, where Karina and Amy, where I met them. And, you know, I think to see other female architects and leaders was really encouraging. I think that, you know, in conversation that we have, just confirming that representation really does make a difference. And I think then I started to understand how architecture can make an impact to the building occupants, you know, by working with, you know, designing schools, and how also it can impact the built environment. But I still had a hard time. If Karina is listening, I apologize. I hope she's not offended. I still have a hard time relating and trying to fit in. And it really takes a long time for me, I feel like, to build that relationship and trust and connection. I think not until like maybe 10 to 15 years fast forward that, you know, I was more encouraged to see in my firm currently someone who's a foreigner like Jean Sandoval, you know, and a woman like Sharon van der Meulen to be the partners of our firm. And, you know, and I think that's sort of another level of encouragement for me. And I think through this work that we're doing right now, also feel that for the first time, I can understand how architecture could impact the society as well. You know, like how urban planning can transform a community, really. But it was through their encouragement that finally I felt like, you know, they pointed to me straight in my head, saying that, you know, that there's more in you that you're showing, and not everybody usually will get, you know, kind of sort of put in a spot like that. And because of that, you know, I felt like I could feel more empowered to go back to my own roots and be actually proud of it. And that's how that's why I think I really focus my efforts on mentorship. You know, ACE is one of them. ACE mentorship, if any of you are familiar with it. We work with high school students to introduce the field of architecture. And, you know, for me, it's really kind of hearing what you're saying in like the sessions panel 1, how you long for like that connection and really wanting to relate. And I feel like the architecture as a field is really foreign to people outside of it. And, you know, I really kind of wanted to share, you know, to the next generation who really care about the climate and the social and racial justice, for them to have just one more channel to funnel their vision. And that, you know, like essentially, you know, the built environments is responsible for 40% of the carbon footprint, right? Gas emission. And, you know, essentially like the improved environments in general will equal to the greater equity, right? And also, you know, my passion through the grassroots establishments like the Art Room for More was born out of, again, the longing for connection and relationing to fellow, you know, either immigrants or people of color who might be struggling through the same things. I did find that through my whole journey to where I am here, I've always looked for that one mentor. You know, I've always kind of like, where is my mentor? Who is like that person who, hey, I want to be like that person when I grow up. To be quite honest, I never really found that one person. It's always like a little bit from here, a little bit from there. And only recently, I feel like I feel accepting the fact that there's not going to be that person that's going to tell me who I'm going to be in the future. Like, you know, everybody just have our own path, and all we need is just a little bit of encouragement. And I'm hoping to share that through Room for More. So thank you for letting me share.
Thanks very much, Leah. And I think Karina still loves you. And Kareem, and here, let's go with Kelly.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Leah, that was beautiful. It's humbling to follow that. So Ed, as Leah had mentioned, Ed had asked us to share a little bit about how we all ended up in architecture. I decided to be an architect in high school after an experience where I got to tour a Frank Lloyd Wright house in the city that I grew up in Michigan, and then followed that with a historic homes tour. And I was really struck by the fact that buildings built within a very short amount of time from one another looked so different, and how architecture could tell the stories of what our society's values are and how that translated into the built environment. I knew nothing other than that about architecture when I decided to go into school, and didn't really have any guidance, even though being a relatively good student, on how to choose a career or how to even explore what career options were available. So I was lucky to have supportive parents who helped me navigate finding colleges and looking into architecture programs, even though they didn't really know anything about architecture, and I still think they wonder what I do sometimes. But so I entered a 5-year architecture program, and it was really difficult. Like I wasn't expecting, or I had no expectation on what would be expected from an architecture student versus potentially another more traditional major. So also not knowing much about design before entering the field, I didn't realize that representation was an issue in the profession, both in terms of racial representation and, at the time, gender representation. So there's a lot of learning that occurred as I entered the design profession. School was challenging. I did enjoy it and definitely learned a lot, but it wasn't until I started working in the profession where I found a mentor. And to use the phrase from the past panel, I found my Jenny when I started working about 2 years in, where I had the opportunity to connect with one of the leaders of the design firm that I worked at, and work closely with him and get more of an understanding of how he approached design. And part of that relationship was, I think, he also recognized something in me that I didn't know that I had. And with his advocacy and support, I was able to really find my voice in architecture and develop a confidence that I didn't have in the beginning. So it was a really transformational relationship, but he's someone I still consider a mentor. And because of him, I also chose to focus my architecture career on healthcare. Fast forward a couple of years until 6 years ago, I moved from the East Coast to the Pacific Northwest. And as I was also trying to find my community in a new location, I was referred by a colleague to the AIA here in Portland. And at the time, the committee was called Forward, which was more focused on women in design, which has since rebranded into Coetti. And it's that connection that allowed me to meet a lot of my colleagues and peers who are on this call. But it was that relationship that helped me find my community when I got here to Portland, which was really important, just to find those other voices that, one, were passionate about the interests that I was in, especially in architecture, representation in the profession, and finding that community to connect with, and also to push forward some of the initiatives that we're talking about now, like mentorship, equitable professions, and all those things.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your story. That one of the things that we are trying to do, and I believe that we're doing a pretty decent job at, is making this sustainable for the next generation. And it is because of the efforts of leaders like Leah and Kelly and Jackie at their own platform that I feel optimistic about what we have to provide the youth in the Portland area. I wanted to also point out in the architecture industry, and more so the state of Oregon, one of the things that's making this sustainable is one of the partners at BRIC, Tony Esteban, has been appointed as a member of the Oregon State Board of Architect Examiners, and she happens to be of Mexican American descent. So going back to the conversation of representation, it's happening. So yes, be the Jenny. We're gonna make that viral, by the way. So I'm gonna keep on saying that until I wear it out. Let's talk a little bit more about the efforts with Maddie and Jicama in the context of Your Street, Your Voice in Camp Elso. Jackie, how were groups like Room for More and Coetti able to expand your network and provide support to Your Street, Your Voice in Camp Elso?
Yeah, so just for a little bit background for folks who don't know Your Street, Your Voice or Camp Elso. So Your Street, Your Voice is an after-school program that was originated out of Hacker Architects when I worked there. We started in 2016 as a direct response for the lack of representation and in leadership in our industry. And we went through the dress certification internally, Hacker did our own internal work, and it was very clear in terms of the gap of the pipeline. It's very similar to the ACE program, except it centers a racial equity, and it's looking at a much more local cohort, connecting professionals, specifically professionals of color with students of color. We prioritize BIPOC, LGBTQIA+. Another piece that's so critical is this relationship with Room for More organizations and Coetti. Last night, Octavio was in class with us. Kelly has been in the majority of our classes as part of cohorts. We have at least 4 or 5 mentors in each session that are from different industries, that are from different disciplines, but that touch part of the design projects. And so again, just to continue to reiterate, one of the main goals is to make those connections for relationships. So either a one-point mentorship relationship can happen, or it can be throughout a person's career and all the different milestones. We start at high school, the ages that we serve are students 14 to 20. And the idea of that is high school is a pivot point in terms of the entry point for a career. Other organizations like Architecture in Schools and Hip Hop Architecture are even looking at that earlier. Their studies show that a lot of underinvested communities tend to drop off of STEAM education earlier because of not having an introduction or not having a clear path or encouragement saying that you can do this. And so Room for More, Coetti, and also I want to name diversity in design, Sunju Kim and Tejara Brown. I don't know if you're in the house right now, but the three of those organizations in Portland have transformed the network to galvanize, to connect students directly. And we have a series of graduating students now that are at the University of Oregon studying architecture that are now teaching assistants. So we're just trying to train up in every point of the pipeline.
Nice. And it sounds like you're going at it in an also organic manner, where you are really engaging with those who have been open, obviously, to what you're doing on that level. And how has that been, I mean, in terms of response?
So of course, we're going to connect and be in partnership with folks that believe in us. I think in the conversation of diversity now, with Your Street, Your Voice and with equity work, I think at this point we're beyond convincing folks that diversity matters and to the point of actual action. And so that's why we're working with leaders that already have a believing for that and also that are working towards the next steps. And what I mean by next steps is the redistribution of power. It's not just, we're not in just like listening and learning sense, we're talking about investment in time and resources and power.
Yeah, I've found that to be a delicate balance because there in the past panel too, there was a conversation about, I think Juan brought it up with respect to, and a lot of people I think are on the same page with respect to people, certain groups just want to take action. But first part is identifying the issue. And
yes,
I think that's why groups like Your Voice was formed, right? And our other respective groups. So now it's kind of like unraveling the centuries of systemic suppression, like Gustavo brought up down to. So yes, let's take a deep breath. Let's acknowledge, let's draw the line. And now this is where the feeling of optimism and forward progress happens. And Kelly or Leah, do you want to share any interview experience within your respective groups about that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just finding ways to reach deep into the students in high school, right? I mean, I think programs even like ACE mentorship, it's kind of optional, like, it's extra curriculum, and students really need to sort of reach out of their normal day-to-day, already a lot of responsibility to get there. And I guess for me personally, the question is, how do we make this not like an extra, but an essential, because I feel like we understand that this industry has a really big impact in like making the change that you see in the world. Because, I believe that the built environment, architecture, and the industry is a reflection of our culture, right? And then, how do we get that message soon so that, and make it available? Like I think not a lot of people understand. When I hop into the profession, it was still like the old, like, if you're good at math, you're good at art, then this is your profession. I don't think it's the case anymore. I feel like, it's changing now. I think it's really more open for a lot of different people who are passionate about different things. And, I think that we're a lot open now with the pursuit of like a project in a collaborative environment. And so I think there's always a place for you, I feel like, in whatever like your strength. So how do we get that message across? Yeah,
and no day like today. Take advantage of that. Kelly, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think just to maybe emphasize some points that Leah and Jackie made. I think within the profession, there is a shift going on in identifying how do we more actively solve some of the representation challenges that the profession has. So there is an emphasis on engaging with the pipeline more, and that's such a huge thing. It's about us also making ourselves more accessible to other people, whether that be students, whether those be community groups. We've I think traditionally been an exclusive profession, and trying to move away from that. If our work is supposed to serve the communities that we live in, and the people who use the buildings and interact with them, we have to engage more with that. And I think as professionals, we all struggle with time. We have project deadlines, we have so many meetings, but I think maybe one of the calls to action I would like to put out there to the group is take the time to make these connections and be involved with some of these groups or other community and mentorship groups out there. You know, it can be an hour a week. Like we can make time to do these things together.
Right. Now, on that note, I just want to plug architecture schools too. I see Candace here in the audience. One thing I was hesitant to bring up in this panel, but I think it kind of made me do the say what when Karina brought it up in panel 2 when she was talking about metaphorical space and physical space, and metaphorical space is really what we're trying to open up here. We're trying to provide the diverse voices in the metaphorical space to be able to design the physical space better. So we can go ahead and dog ear that if no one's got any comments on it right now, but I thought it was something worth bringing up. I do want to also ask Madeline and Hikma, with respect to your experience within Your Street, Your Voice and Camp ELSO, how transformative has it been since you've been involved? And given that, you know, these are supplementary programs that we're talking about, how has it essentially helped you to progress in whatever in your journey? Yeah, either one of you can take it.
Speaking of my experience, since I'm a first-year architecture student at PSU, all of my professors this term are older white men, and Your Street, Your Voice is something that I intentionally looked for a place to like find, because I was connecting with architecture firms in Oregon so I could keep up to date with them throughout my undergrad education, and just like realizing that a lot of representation of like educators and mentors that I've had throughout my life, and also like right now in college, have been predominantly white men or white people, and that it wasn't, or in most cases when it comes to recognizing equity, diversity, and inclusion in design and in architecture, for white people, it can be very hypothetical to them because they don't have the lived experience that it takes to see that marginalized people have to deal with these inadequate institutions every day. So like Your Street, Your Voice has been really integral for me in seeing so many different so much different representation in the architecture field, and not just seeing it as being like you have to be a licensed architect to like succeed in architecture. There's so many different pathways that you can take. And I think too, it helped dispel the myth that architecture requires like a lot of knowledge in math, because I think that scares away a lot of people too, just because like a lot of people aren't very excited about math, but and also just seeing that like you can be a part of the change that through design that makes more spaces for BIPOC youth. And also like seeing, just having Jackie as like a mentor figure for me has been really great, because she just like is connecting with resources, and she was very willing to accommodate me and like the needs that I had, being like an architecture student and having like studio classes and maybe not being able to fully participate, which just made me like more happy to like be part of that group and to contribute, and to like hear from other youth too is like a great part, because especially with online school right now, it's so difficult to connect with people in my classes, and it's very rare to like actually have those discussions with each other, but when we do, it's just like so great to just talk about like racial justice as an inherent part of design, and like acknowledging white supremacy and colonialism as roots in our institutions and in our educational institutions, and like how are we going to combat that? And I found that a lot in organizing spaces, and to find it in an educational space like Your Street, Your Voice has been just really great for me. But yeah, I'll pass it off to Hikma if she wants to talk about her experience and Empower Her, because it's a bit of a different experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
With Empower Her, like I said before, I would always just kind of push my background just back and just ignore where I was from or everything I identified as. But I think ever since I joined Empower Her, it made me more outspoken on problems that I felt like that needed to be changed. It made me a better person, and just having that space just with women, femme, non-binary folks, it's just such a safe space to say whatever you want, whatever is in your heart. You could just say it, and it's not weird, you know. And I think it's a very calming place, and I think it's a very special place for me. So.
Thank you. I think that's kind of touching up in the metaphorical space. We have to acknowledge everyone's metaphorical space and make everyone feel welcome. Going back to Your Street, Your Voice, Jackie, how could the professional design community better support students and programs like what you're spearheading, and what would you consider next steps or additional ways to move forward?
I just want to take a moment and just like shout out Maddie and Hikma, because they are our leaders. They're going to be our futures. We had one of our amazing consultants in class last night, Tony Funches, and we see our students as the change makers and legacy makers that they are. And when we think about the built environment, we are building legacy in buildings. We built 100-year-old buildings. And so how do we do that through a racial justice lens? And for Empower Her, we think of design as decision making. Each student gets to decide a topic that they want to address that empowers Black and Brown, women, femme, non-binary communities. Hikma's using the creative form of a video to campaign for a requirement of ethnic studies. So in ways in which that our industry, architecture, engineering, construction, and design, I think I'm gonna go back in terms of, one of the ways that we find healing in our classes is to acknowledge the trauma that we're going through. And there's layers of trauma. You mentioned this, Ed. It's been 400 years of trauma of racism and white supremacy. We are in acute trauma with the pandemic right now. And so acknowledging that classes are one slice of our lives, and we encourage everyone to show up as them full selves. A differentiator of our classes is that they're paid learning experiences. This is not a volunteer. We treat all of our students as consultants, as the lived experts that they are. Even though we are teaching a skill set of learning how to draw floor plans to scale or learning how to create a video, the content and the idea making and the problem solving is all them. And so I think, which is very parallel to what we do as professional designers and builders. And so I think ways that y'all can support, it's the same thing, time, money, energy, right? And so any of that, I want to echo what Kelly and Leah, as you both are mentors in all different avenues, it's as little as showing up for an hour. It's as much as being able to offer a scholarship or offer a paid job for folks. I think it's whatever opportunities you can at this point.
Thank you. I also want to open it up to the audience. If you have questions, please go ahead and type it in the chat. Yeah, otherwise, Kelly and Leah, do you have anything else that you want to kind of bring up to the group with regards to, our current efforts? I feel one thing, and I mentioned it earlier, one thing that I'm really, really happy about is just we're all collaborating to accomplish what we want to accomplish. And it's, to me, that really feels good and organic.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, I think that there's this message that we've been discussing here, Ed, that will get across pretty clearly. I hope that everybody come out of this knowing that there is something that they can do. You know, we talk about this, there's a macro effort, there's a micro effort, there's all of these organizations and, you know, sort of like kind of more of an organized way of making a difference for the future. But there is also, you know, kind of like the micro efforts. Like, I feel like the things like, you know, Room for More sort of is born out of that, right? Like, we're all busy, but, you know, I think our motto is always like, let's just do what we can do when we can do it. And even that works, you know, and, you know, I feel like, you know, I hope that message is kind of, it's clear. Like, you know, like even if my involvement in the mentorship and the Room for More is mainly sort of the macro, you know, I feel like in the daily life, I'm more like kind of open-minded now. I see things a bit more aware of what's happening in our country, and you know, kind of, and sometimes on the other side, being on the other side, sometimes all you need is just a little bit encouragement, just a tiny bit, like, hey, you know, I know what you're talking about. Just keep going, you know, even if it's just that, you know, I think no effort is too small.
Yep. Someone to acknowledge and reinforce. One thing that I was wondering about, Maddie and Hikmat, you're both here, but how are your peers feeling in terms of, you know, your peers who have the same interests as you and who come from not necessarily similar backgrounds, but come from not the dominant culture? Do they feel like they have their support system? And have they shared their experiences with you in that sense?
I can go first if Hikmat isn't ready, but I think that a lot of us in organizing spaces and in educational spaces are just really feeling the burnout of what like 2020 has been, because like something that I was about to put in the chat was that just like capitalism and like all these forces like are trying to keep us from connecting with one another and creating community in order to dismantle the systems that are currently oppressing us and keeping us from being in community with each other. So it's just like this cyclical like positive feedback loop of keeping the oppressed. And I think it can be really easy to get disheartened and like caught up in that, because also with like all the informational overload that has been going on like recently with technology, it's just like we become so apathetic and desensitized to it all that it's just hard to stay passionate in this work for like racial equity, inclusion, and justice in design and like in whatever field that we're pursuing, honestly. So like I've noticed in a lot of my friends, it's just like dealing with their personal like burnout and like their mental health struggles at the same time that they're trying to stay connected to a world that is going through global suffering and like collective suffering, but at the same time like collective justice and like standing up in these movements like Black Lives Matter and movements that have been happening for a long time. So I think it's just about like trying to take care of yourself and prevent burnout, but it can be difficult because it's like you don't want to stop working for these things, and it's just like I think especially in America we're really bad at that, because I'm like connected with groups like Bayan and Malaya in the Philippines. They're who they like really stress the importance of rest, and like they intentionally take rest and say, okay, let's like spend a week like not doing this anymore, like we've made success and let's stop here, and like bring in that success and that joy and enthusiasm so that you can keep doing what you're doing. And I think that's an important lesson to connect to all fields and to education and organizing.
Yeah, this is, I mean, going back to the idea that this is a marathon. This is also not a fad. This needs to sustain. Hikmat, did you have anything else to add?
Yeah. For me, personally, my peers have been very supportive, and I have been very supportive of them, because having the idea of having ethnic studies in all Portland public schools isn't just my idea. I reached out to many students from different backgrounds than me, Latino students, just different backgrounds, to see if they were supportive of having this ethnic studies in our schools. And and of course, all of them said yes, because they want to learn about their backgrounds and their people. And I think reaching out to people from different backgrounds, and understanding what they want and where they're coming from is really useful when you're trying to make a difference. You don't just go off of your idea and what you want, because your ideas and what you want and what you want to achieve might affect someone else. So yeah.
Hairs are standing up right now. So we are coming into a closing of our discussion. Does anyone have any questions for the panel at this point? With our few minutes left. And if not, I just really want to thank the panel. I want to thank PDX Green Schools and our collective groups for putting this together. This was an awesome series with many diverse voices, different backgrounds, and yeah, I'll throw it back to you, Riley. I'm very grateful.
You know, we did book an additional 20 minutes of our lunch table chat if you want to take it.
It's up to the group.
I'll be respectful of all of your time.
Yeah.
I'm totally fine with keeping on going. I'd love to hear from some of the other panelists more.
Sure, absolutely. Did you have a specific question for anyone, Maddie?
I guess like I liked what was being said by Leah about mentorship and like the importance of mentorship, because that's something that's been on my mind a lot recently. Just like having people who can like support me in like acquiring knowledge, and also just like being more confident and staying like motivated. So like, I don't know if you guys have any words of advice for us, or like on mentorship, or just like anything that has to do with that in general.
Kelly or Leah, want to take that?
Yeah.
I'll
Lee, if you
talk.
want to go first.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go for it.
Okay, so thank you, Maddie. I mean, I think, you know, mentorship is definitely not a straightforward thing, right? I think, as I was mentioning, like ideally, I'd like to see, you know, someone who's in a position that I want to be in, and then have the same exact kind of story than I have. So they've gone through all of these things that I've gone through and can tell me what to do to get there, ideally. But that doesn't happen, right? And I think my suggestion for you is to just not get discouraged by it. If you don't see what you're looking for, like kind of just don't be discouraged by it, and just stay open-minded. Like as kind of I mentioned, I feel like for most of my life, I try to be just a sponge as much as possible. And sometimes it, you know, like things that I learn come from a person in architecture, but sometimes it comes from random people who I watch, you know, or like kind of if I see a lecture and then there's a little bit of piece from that lecture that I like, or just, you know, like, or sometimes even from dancers, you know, like dancers have such different mentality, but it's creative also. But, you know, I think, you know, I hope that you kind of just understand also it's a journey, you know, just enjoy the journey. I always kind of, I feel like if I can look back and tell myself back then what you know, what to do, just like relax, like, you know, enjoy the journey of like getting to know other people, and, you know, get bits and pieces and relate it to yourself as you go. And just kind of believe that eventually you'll get there, eventually, you know, because any kind of even little seed that you plant in your mind, you know, you just believe that you're gonna get there, and that you have your own story, and then just, you know, just keep on going.
Yeah, if I could add to that, and totally agree with what Leah says. I think that's part of the beauty of having a diverse profession and community is you can find mentors in different ways and in different people. I also suggest also look at your peers. I consider my peers, so Ed, Leah, Jackie, Octavio. Even though all of us are maybe around the same age or have similar experience levels, my peers are also my mentors, and I've learned so much from them. So with Your Street, Your Voice and Empower Her, those are connections you could potentially have for a long time as you move into the profession. And your peers and colleagues have equally rich experiences and also offer a community to share ideas and grow ideas with. So. And frankly, I find Maddie and Hickema, I find both of you as mentors also. So it's kind of a different, maybe a different way to look at mentorship, where I think, being involved in Your Street, Your Voice, I've learned a ton from the perspectives of the students, including you, Maddie. So just there's always an opportunity to share and learn, and kind of broadening that idea of what mentorship can potentially be, and really, make it your own and define it for yourself.
I'll just add to that. I want to say that it's okay to have a fluid, meandering path in your career, because that just makes your experience more substantial.
Thank you. I really appreciate all that, because what I'm getting from this is that sometimes you have to become the mentor that you're looking for in life, or that you've spent your whole life looking for. And it seems like you guys have become those people, or on your way to becoming those people. So thank you.
And we're all 29 years old.
Hey, Ed.
Yep.
Hey, everyone here. I think there's
29 years older.
Yeah, there's a couple. Yeah, I'm older. I'm not 29. A couple of questions in the chat. I was hoping you guys could tackle. The ones from Brittany about making the space, normalizing discussions, speaking truth to power in your organizations, and then Jackie's question about the challenge in your Jedi journeys in your organization, particularly. I think that might be a good discussion if we can have it.
Yeah. Sorry. Just I'll turn off my chat. So back to Brittany's question. How do we normalize these discussions in making a space? Does anyone in the panel want to tackle that one?
I can start. I think even panels like this, and creating those situations in the community where we do talk about it. And I think that's something I think everybody on this panel is trying to do, is to bring that conversation to the forefront. And speaking specifically for Coetti, that influences a lot of the events that we plan. Also working with the AIA here in Oregon is just creating the opportunity for folks to step in and engage in the conversation, and just starting to make it more common. And I think fortunately one of the calls to action we try to put out in our events is to take what we talk about as a group like here and take it to your firm, or take it to the community that you're engaging with. So the more often these opportunities can occur, that's the first step to normalizing.
Absolutely. Anyone else want to add on?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a hard one, because I totally understand, where it's coming from. And it takes a lot of courage, right, to speak of something that you believe in that may not be reciprocated by your superiors. But I think maybe one way of looking at it is just to just do it. Don't kind of don't feel like you have to normalize these discussions. Just have it, you know, like if you think of it as it's not like me trying to be different by talking about these things, it's just kind of like, well, these are the facts, you know, and these are just what you know, everybody is, I feel like industry is feeling like it's moving in that direction. And I'm not saying that there's always going to be, you know, like strongholds in the other extreme that will probably you know, sort of put a roadblock in the conversation, but it's okay, right? Maybe, you know, I think knowing that there are other people who support these type of discussion, and you know, sometimes I feel like when in channels like other channels like Room for More, you know, like if I'm trying to have a conversation with my superior that I'm comfortable with, but just having kind of that discussion first with fellow people who are, you know, in agreement with me, and just finding that courage to just have it and just as if it is normal. Not sure.
I would even say that it's really a matter of self-preservation, providing a space where you have validity, and
right. And then be prepared for the outcome too, right? If it's sort of like, okay, we're obviously not on the same page, then maybe, you know, something's not right there.
One of the things, Leah, that I can kind of input is, you know, it's you know, I started the Jedi at PAE, and one of the, I suppose the benefits of the movement that's going on right now, social movement that's going on right now, is like people are more open to those kind of discussions. And through that committee, I feel like we are more empowered to talk about and have difficult conversations. There are things that I probably would have not brought up a year or two ago that we're talking about now. And, you know, there's still difficult conversations, but people are more, it seems like people are more open to having those conversations. So I think it's like, you know, you should have those conversations now while that's fresh in people's minds and the movement is going. The other thing to Jackie's question about the Jedi, one of the biggest issues that I've seen is having those difficult conversations on both sides, right? So there are folks in the Jedi committee that are very action oriented and very passionate about their issues, and they want to make immediate impact. Sometimes in large organizations, it's hard. You can't make immediate impact. So you have to be able to temper that and take small steps to get to where you want. And so, you know, having those difficult conversations with the folks that are passionate and want to make change, but also having those difficult conversations with the folks that can make the change, but, you know, are hesitant to move, right? So there's both sides of that.
Can I add something? I have a little bit of a different perspective now, because how I work with firms is a consultant relationship. So I have a little bit of external. I really appreciate what Leah, Kelly, and Erwan were talking about in terms of internal organizing and normalizing and practicing equity work. I think because, as Ruwan was just saying, it's multifaceted, and knowing who has the decision-making power to actually make change is really critical. Also, who is being burdened with the labor? Maddie had a really great comment in the chat regarding that, and oftentimes it is staff of color that are being either heavily encouraged or voluntold to do the equity work. And so as a consultant, what we do, yes, tokenism, exactly. And at Camp Elso, since we are a BIPOC-led community organization that's leading environmental and built environment education, we are very strategic in who we partner with. We have developed a partnership assessment tool, very similar to like a JUST certification or like a B Corp certification, but it is an audit of what's the temperature and what's the cultures of the organization. How is an organization centering BIPOC staff? How is an organization creating pathways for empowerment and agency for leadership? And so I think oftentimes market changes because of market pressure. And so the fact that AIA has the guides to equitable practice, the fact that there's so many certifications that you can get that adds branding and marketing value, as shitty as that is, capitalism still, we operate in a bottom line industry. I would suggest, in addition to trying to do internal work, which that is a struggle in terms of that's a heavy lift, see if your clients or your consultants are doing, what are they doing in their Jedi journeys? Because we're seeing clients now, PCC being a perfect example, it's required that you have a diversity action plan. It's required of these certain baselines of what your teams look like, of what your design processes look like. And so trying to go on both ends might be another way to move towards justice in your firms.
I think adding on to what Leah said, if you feel like doing it, just do it, and reach out to people from different backgrounds if they want to do it, and from different ages as well. And even if just like 5 people attend, it's on your way of like becoming normalized, you know. So I think it's important to have these kinds of discussions.
Absolutely. We have a few minutes left, and before we lose too many people, I want to throw it back to Jackie, because I understand you have something to share.
I do.
I have your slides, Jackie.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. So this week we've got a few more events happening in regards to opportunities to see more of our students. So tonight, IIDA, Interior Design Association, has a forum where our student, Raven Pierce, she's a fellow of Your Street, Your Voice last year and in Empower this year. And we're talking about impact design, past and present and future, with taking ownership as well. So that's going to be really great. And then next week, if you all want to come to see the final presentations and we do Vital Voices. It's a panel series of every class, every cohort that we do. So Chandra Robinson from Lever, Audrey Alverson, Jamie Newsome, and Jocelyn Rice will be speaking. And also you'll be able to see Hikma's final presentation in her video there. And then, so that's Tuesday. And then Wednesday is Vital Voices and Your Street, Your Voice, where CL Techley, Bill Hart, Nate McCoy, and Sunju Kim, who's diversity, the other co-founder of Diversity in Design, as well as you'll see the final presentations of Maddie's project. So thank you. And I put all the links in the chat. Please, I'll put my email in there too, so feel free to reach out.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. And I did want to pull those slides back up from Hikma and Maddie, just calling for Hikma's film opportunity and the Portland Youth Climate Summit. And I actually don't think we got to this one. Maddie, do you want to speak to your call for creatives?
Yeah, so I forgot to mention that before, but we're just between like the workshops, and also it can be integrated into the workshops. We want to have BIPOC, LGBTQ and LGBTQ creatives come in and like offer up their anything, honestly, like your poems, your songs, your videos, just to like share with the collective. And you're free to just contact us through Instagram or through our email, pdx.ycs@gmail. And like if anyone wants to share this info around too, it's coming up pretty soon, and we want to make sure that people who want to share it have the opportunity to also like share their art on a bigger platform, because there's going to be a good amount of people there. And then We're also in the process of like being able to offer stipends to performers because we want to pay people for their labors and for showing their art. So yeah, share this information around. Also the PDX Youth Climate Summit info. It's also on our Instagram, pdx.youth climate summit. Thank you.
Awesome. Hukama, did you want to say anything else about your video before I wrap this up?
Yeah, sure. I'm doing a video for Empower Her, and I need videos of people saying we need ethnic studies in all PPS schools or Portland Public Schools, and then a picture of you afterwards to go with the video. So yeah, that's all.
Well, that's great. We're just pushing it 120. I want to say thank you so much to all of our panelists, Ed, Leah, Kelly, Jackie, Maddie, Hikama, and thank you to all of the other panelists that have participated in this series. To me, it feels like this conversation is certainly not over. Every time we end one of these panels, I just want to keep talking for another 12 hours. So the Portland Green Schools meeting is tomorrow. If anybody is interested, go ahead and email us. But I suspect we'll all be back here real soon. Anyone else have any parting words before I shut this baby down?
Thank you all. I've had a really good time. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys. This was
Thank
awesome.
you.
Oh, thank you. I'll leave this up for a second because there are a couple emails in the chat if you guys want to note them down. So I'll just go on mute, wait a minute or two, and sign off as you need. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you for this. Really appreciate you all.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Really great insights.
It was nice to share a panel with all of you.
Same.
Okay, I always hate the awkward silence at the end of Zooms. I'm gonna head out. Bye. Thank you.
Yeah, Maddie.
Bye, Maddie.
Bye, Maddie.
Bye, Hikma. Thank you, Riley. Thank you, Kelly. Always.
Thank you, Jackie. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
good to see you.
Good to see you. We'll see you tomorrow or later.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm,
absolutely.
and I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Yes.
So,
All right. Take care. Bye.
bye, everyone.